Hey there, chess kids, it's FunMasterMike, it's YouTube, and it's learning time with a little side of fun. Now before we get going, hit that subscribe button. Today, we're going to talk about sometimes in chess, when you learn a lesson, you get to use it right away. That's not always true. You might learn the two bishops mate and never have to use it, or use it 20 years later. It's kind of like life, you know? I learned how to jumpstart a car. Have I ever actually jump-started a car? Well, actually, yes, I have, but it's only every once in a while. In this example, I'm going to show you about how you can learn from your opponent right away. This was the fantastic Speed Chess Championship final between Hikaru Nakamura and Magnus Carlsen. Ever heard of them? Yeah, it was only one of the most exciting chess matches ever. Now, in this position, Hikaru is black, Magnus is white, and Magnus's queen is in danger. Turns out that if the queen goes back to d2, there's no video. But unluckily for Magnus, lucky for you, the queen did not go to d2 and she went to the square b5. Why is that so bad? The computer's even giving it a double question mark. Well, the queen had to guard a square, which did not look important, but it turns out it was. Hikaru played knight f4 check, an unbelievable move. My computer's even telling me it's unbelievable. A double exclam move, and here white has two bad choices. Either white goes to the back rank, in which case black invades in the back rank, or if white takes the knight, a very common pattern in chess, knights guard kings from queens really well, but not when they're diagonal. You'd like the knight to be on this square. It would guard the king straight away and from a lot of checks. But with the knight on f3, the queen would just dive into g4, and again, the white king would have to go backward and only bad things would happen. For example, if the king went to f1, you would just simply take the knight, and it's not a case of black just trading knights. In fact, these rooks are invading to either the first or the second rank, and the white king is not going to survive this position. Okay, we need to go back. What Magnus actually did was he tried to move king h1, but it turns out in this position, there's several winning moves. Now, Hikaru played the move queen h3, but because we usually advise you to do things with check, let's just look at the most forcing sequence. By the way, queen h3 is actually the fastest win, but you give your opponent a free move. So what I would have done, mere mortals, would have played a move like rook c1 check because, you know, it makes sense to continue with check. And now, white would probably put the knight in the way. That's why Magnus put the king in the corner of the board. And now in this position, you probably do have to dive in with your queen. Notice there's no sack, sack, mate. Sack, take. It's mate, except it's not. The queen would go back to the square f1, and you do not have a mate. However, now we would play the Hikaru move, queen h3, and there's just way too many threats. You're going to mate here. You can even play sack and then mate if you needed to. There's just too many ways to infiltrate. And notice that white's queen, she cannot occupy this diagonal to guard g2 because all of these squares are covered. Okay. So, what's the lesson? It's that sometimes you can put your knight en prise to be attacked by a pawn. Now, it turns out Magnus learned that lesson and got to use it only a few minutes later in this same match. Okay, truthfully, Magnus knew this lesson, but you, dear viewers, maybe you're learning this for the first time. Let's move on to a little bit later in the match. Here, Magnus is white, and you can see there's certain pressure building up on the c6 pawn, and Hikaru made the natural move. His rook was in danger, and he played his rook to c7. Turns out, should have gone to b8, even though it looks weird to not defend your backward pawn, and then, you know, play for a move like b5 and try to trap that bishop. And if the bishop runs away, then your rook could just go back and make sure that your pawn on the half-open diagonal is defended. But Hikaru made the natural move. If we go back, Hikaru put his rook on c7. Double question mark. Now, of course, Magnus didn't see the double question mark in his game. He had to use the lesson that was just used on him from a few minutes prior. And what did he play? Drum roll. That was more like a trumpet. Knight to b5, forking the queen and the rook. It's the most unlikely move because it looks like the knight can just be captured. After all, the rook is defended by the queen. What's the point? Well, the point is, when the knight is captured, which it was, the queen is overworked. Okay, now you're thinking, well, FunMaster, even if she has to go and take back on c7, she's only losing a pawn. But that's not your average pawn. When the white queen takes this pawn, she will be forking the house. So, in this position, rook takes did happen, queen takes d5, and there's no way for black to save the piece. If black simply moves the rook somewhere, we'll just pick a random square, maybe d8. Then, when Magnus captures the bishop, It's not that he just won a pawn, but this pawn is incredibly weak as well, and he's got 2 center pawns against 0. White would go on to win. So in the actual game, if we go back after queen takes d5, Hikaru, resourceful as ever, tried to trap the queen. He played the move knight to d6, allowing the rook to get captured, and then when the knight moved back to b8, he was banking all of his hopes on bishop e4. But it turns out bishop e4 doesn't really get the job done because white can always play the move d5, and weirdly, there is no way to win the white queen, so Magnus went on to win. I quite liked this match, not just for the tactics, but because of the repeating of patterns. Putting your knight on a square where it can be captured, we call that en prise, an instant lesson from the best chess players in the world to you, dear chess kids.